All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one podcast on innovative teamwork. Been that way for what now, 2 years and running. No plans on stopping at all. Brand new episodes come out every single day. To my regular listeners, you already know how we get down. Whatever the obstacle is, whatever the challenge may be, whatever it is you may be going through, we are here to indirectly tell you you are not going through it alone. And I got to tell you again, today we have a performance coach, a peak performance coach who has a ton of experience, Mr. Faisal Ensaun. Welcome to the show, man.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me here. Excited for our conversation.
I'm pumped because I was listening to you before, and as I was hearing your story, you don't come from the US. You have a background in which you had to, you came from Afghanistan, you had to overcome a lot of difficult times. So before were able to get into this place where you are now and helping coach people, and there's a ton of, by the way, guys, a ton of testimonials out there, a ton of people out there who speak very highly of Faisal. But when you hear your story, you can tell that there were certain things that you had to overcome as you were transitioning from Afghanistan to here. So why don't we just kind of dive deeper into that a little bit, and then we'll kind of go from there in terms of how you were able to establish yourself and be someone that is so trusted.
Yeah, yeah. Why don't we start right in the middle of the action and then we'll go back to that because
Let's do
I
that,
like
man. We're gonna do it. And for
what,
you
what,
regular listeners, you already know this how I get down, man. We keep everything all organic, all impromptu, and I do my research on people. So wherever they want to take it, you already know how we roll, man.
yeah, and then the reason why I like starting there is so people understand where the context is and where it all began as well.
Yes,
So
sir.
for me, it starts back actually in Canada when I was in my early 20s. First few years I was there, and I remember the that memory is very vivid for me. I was just coming out of a subway station, uh, completely burnt out, and probably still drunk under multiple influences. I come out, I go to the corner of the subway station. It's probably a weekday because I remember a lot of people walking by. I didn't even know when it was. And it was just one of those scenes. And if you ever watch some movies where everything around you slows down, it kind of felt like that. And in the moment, I just felt really weak. I felt like my body was that of a 90-year-old man, even though I was in my early 20s. I threw up on the floor. I see blood. I wasn't even surprised by that because I knew I'd been abusing my body for a while now. And in that moment, I felt like I had an interesting experience because it was probably the first time in a long time I felt pain, all of it, like physical, emotional, spiritual. Lots of things came rushing where I knew I wasn't living my values. I was disconnected from my culture, faith, from my family, from
Mhm.
myself, and I was just going down the path I knew was going to end really badly. And in that moment, I also felt it was weirdly, I also felt a sense of peace right after, a sense of connection that I had never felt before. And I didn't know what to make of it, to be honest. It's not like I had a big epiphany and I started thinking something. I didn't. It was just, I just realized something. And in retrospect, I
Right.
look at that as something a lot of religious people might call it was God's grace,
Mhm.
maybe, or a moment of realization where I realized that what something needs to change, and something did change. I got I re-enrolled back into college. That I had left. I left I got to a job where I had to work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so I could not go out at all.
Yeah.
And but in that process, I remember I had a security job, so I was in this place where there was virtually nobody. It was in the middle of nowhere,
Mhm.
and it got me thinking a lot. I had a lot of time on my hand, and I started thinking, well, what went wrong in the process? I came from a good family.
Mhm.
Yes, we came from a lot of hardship and lots of things, but our parents provided a lot. We came to a such a better place.
Mhm.
There's so much opportunity, but I'm kind of throwing my life down the drain.
Right.
What happened? And I had to kind of put aside all my beliefs and put a pause on them and started studying anything that I could get my hands on, from psychology to philosophy, spirituality, history, sciences related to human behavior. And the more I studied, the more I realized that I needed to change a lot of things.
Mhm.
Fortunately or unfortunately, that took years of going into different things and trying to understand and apply. For the next 15 years or so, I tried to grow as a human being and
Mhm.
try to understand where I was going. And then fast forward about 10 years, 15 years, I think 12 years around that time when I met my coach and mentor. And then I spent about 6 months with him. And I felt like he had completely rewired my brain and I was a new person. And that got me into this journey of entrepreneurship, into this journey of becoming a coach because I saw the power of it, the kind of growth I had in 6 months.
Yeah,
Um, I, I created a version of that in 15 years. So it was like, why wasn't that available to me
right.
at the time? And just going back to your question now, in my journey, I realized that I was born in Afghanistan, but my family had to flee because of war and other challenges that you've
Yeah, that's
probably
what I
heard in
saw
the
that.
news.
Right, right.
Right. My parents had to move to the neighboring country, which is Pakistan. We lived there for a number of years. Very different cultures from each other,
Right.
some similarities. But when I was 17, I came over to Canada.
Mhm.
Within that time, of course, it was exciting to come to this place, but there was such a huge cultural shift.
Yeah,
And on top of
that's
that,
actually, and I'm glad you, and not to cut you off, but I'm glad you brought that up because as I'm listening to you talk, you can see it, you can see the growth, you can see the development, you can see the amount of things that you were intentionally trying to do, and you were very intentional about that. And as you listeners, one of the things that you have to really, I want to make sure I'm really re-emphasizing that is regardless of where you come from, essentially your intentions are going to be leading you where you are. So you got to focus on those intentions. And as you look back on it now, I'm sure again, you're never going to be fully developed. You're still developing. When you think about that culture shift, and that's something that I've experienced too in my own life, how do you sort of analyze that version of you? You know what I'm saying? Because when you mention, hey, you got to move forward, these were things that, you had no control over. And then you come over to Canada and now there's a new culture. How do you kind of break down that culture shift when it's happening so often for other people? And like you said, everyone doesn't even know that there's access to coaches that can help them through that transition. And then they're left to deal with it with the alcohol, with the drugs, and abusing themselves and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, and most people underestimate how much complexity is there in a given moment for any human being. And to be honest, I didn't know where to get help.
Right.
And there were other people from my culture, from my family, who adapted in different ways. Some people adapted very well, some people didn't.
Mhm.
And but then it brought another element. It was actually the first time, even though we were still, when we came to this side of the world, we were still considered poor, but I felt rich because this is the first time I felt safe, even though we lived in the hood.
Exactly.
It's like my
Exactly.
friends would always say, "We got to get out of here." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, this is the safest place
Yeah.
I've ever lived in."
Yeah, that it's funny you mentioned because so earlier I did a live stream talking about so my parents not from Afghanistan, we're from Trinidad, and they moved. I'm first generation Trinidad, so they moved from Trinidad to the States, and my mother would tell me all the time that they grew up very very poor, and what the way I talk about is like even though we lived in the kind of the suburban part of DC, we were rich compared to what my mother had lived through. And it's important that I mention that and you guys understand that rich is a state of mind. Money can kind of be a state of mind because it's all about where you're going, where you come from, how far you've come from some of the things that were handed to you and things of that nature.
Yeah, and it's relative, and this is
Yeah.
why one of the reasons why there's a lot of competition and a lot of unhappiness partially is the way people look at this, and also it creates a people compare. Like, your mind will compare you to so many people around you.
There's a program like that. I mean, it's just everywhere. Everywhere you see is going to be some sort
Yeah.
of comparison.
And social media amplifies that to a whole other
Amplifies it.
level
Yep.
because I literally did a video before this on my one of my channels. Like, don't be fooled by how people appear because what I talk to people every day, how they
Mhm.
appear and how they are in the background are two different things. And I
Absolutely.
always share, I mean, like whatever, even if I'm sharing wins, And I give them context. I'm like, it took me a long time to get there. I have my own
Exactly.
challenges. I have my own struggles. I deal with them every day. This is
1,000%.
not
Yeah,
some reel that tells you I have
I
everything
was telling a
perfect.
colleague of mine that yesterday. She and I have been teaching together for about 3 years now, and she's into the content creation and life coaching and all that. And I told her the people we follow, the people that we really do follow every day, we can tell there's a sense of authenticity of they're going through something strong every day. No one is going to follow you online if you aren't putting it out there, good or bad, and the authenticity is just clear. It's like, screaming all over you so people can feel that through a screen.
Yeah, but it's hard though. It's
Yeah,
very
it's hard.
hard
And that's one thing,
to
because we
be
know it's hard. It's really
authentic, right?
difficult. Hmm.
It's incredibly hard because we're all, as human beings, afraid of being judged one way or another. We're afraid that, and most people are more scared of what other people think versus what they think of themselves. It's like the
1,000%.
reality for most people.
Mhm.
And so the other thing I realized, aside from cultural shift, which I didn't know how to get help for, is I realized there was a lot of trauma involved in my life, and not just one generation, multiple generation. Imagine living with multiple generations of people going through survival. All of a sudden, everything is good in the place that you're living. All of a sudden, war breaks out. You
Yeah,
leave, and
that
your
was that
parents
was
live
the
in
crazy part
survival.
about how old were you when that happened?
I left. For me, it was I was very young, 3.5 years old. I have a few older siblings, anywhere from at the time they were from 6 all the way to 10 years old,
Right, so
and
they like vividly remember being
they
raped.
remember.
Right,
They
wow.
remember. Well, a lot of people don't know this though. So even if you don't remember, so what happens is if you watch children, there's a part of their brain, I think it's in the hippocampus area,
Mhm.
where you don't develop this part of your memory called recall memory. So before 2.5, 3 years old, most people don't remember much. It starts to build up. But here's the problem: that's recall memory. Your body remembers everything. In fact, we know at this point that your body remembers you being in the womb. We understand that how a mother felt in an environment affects a child. That
Mhm.
stuff needs to be dealt with, but none of us know how to deal with it. My parents didn't know how to deal with it. They were surviving, to be honest.
Yeah.
They did the best that they could. They moved forward, and then fast forward a few years later, when I was 17, I came here in teenage years,
Mhm.
and I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, and
Yeah,
and I'm
that's tough.
exposed
And
to a
I've been
whole
to
new
Canada,
culture.
so like, yeah, I know.
And I'm dealing with all the stuff that I can't make sense of. Where am I going to go to? I have no answers. I have no support. Well, alcohol was a good solution. Drugs were a good solution.
Right.
Going out was a good solution. It actually helped in the moment, but the problem was that it had really negative
Dependent
repercussions.
on it. You become dependent on it, and that
Yeah.
that that feeling. We had a previous guest who has a program where he teaches people how to be sober, and I was expressing to him, last year was my first ever year going completely sober, like no alcohol, just went completely sober because it was something that. These substances, and you regular listeners have heard me say this on multiple occasions. I'm going to repeat it here, is these substances, if you get too dependent on these substances, it is not going to end well. You never want to get to a point where you're so dependent on alcohol to have fun or drugs to have fun or to just associate. You want to be accepted because you are being you and you're being authentic. So, one of the things that you had said earlier that really triggered me was the fact that you took a security job specifically so you had more time to read. You couldn't go out Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And
Well, I
from
took it specifically so I couldn't go out because I
yeah,
couldn't
that's what I'm
get
saying. You couldn't
out
go
of
out, you couldn't go party, you couldn't, and that's something that similarly I lived through because I used to work overnight at a gym and I would spend so much time reading books, like book after book after book after book. So, when were you able to find the time to dive into so much material to where then you meet the coach and then you're able to codify and create a business system that's actually working and helping people, achieve their high performance?
Yeah, and at least my bias is that your professional development is connected to your personal development, and that's what I see with my clients. You cannot separate the two. If you and I connect it
I
all to
gotta
leadership.
pause you there, guys. I gotta pause you guys there because I want to make sure that sinks in. They're the same thing. All right. Your personal and your professional development are go hand in hand. I'm so glad that you've confirmed that because that's something that I fight for every day. Like your personal, like that whole saying, don't take it personal, it's business and all that. It's just business, don't take it personal. I'm like,
Yeah.
that never made any sense to me. Never,
Yeah.
because it's the same, you're moving in that same way where you want to live authentically. So go ahead. I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that one's
And I want to share a quick story. So one of the potential clients, actually he's already decided to move forward, but he's a leader of a large organization, quite a few people he's managing, hundreds of people, and he had dedicated about 20 plus years of his life building a business, and he's very successful. I did great, lots of respect for him.
right.
One of the things that he knew that, well, he instinctively realized he wasn't going to dedicate his time to family and relationships and other things, and he moved away from all that stuff and he focused on the business. And he moved forward because of his ambition, because of some of the
Right.
skill sets he had. Now, at a point where he wants to actually transition out of the company, he wants to hand it over to some of the team members that he's been training.
Right.
Here's the problem. He doesn't know how to connect with them. He doesn't trust them. He doesn't understand how to build a culture yet fully. And now he's back to the same problem he left 20 years ago, was relationships. So it's now following him. And that happens all the time. People run away from their personal relationships. All of a sudden in business partnerships, they struggle all
Mhm.
of a sudden, and trying to connect with other people. I'm working with another, I have a community for coaches that I train as well. Another coach who she's doing everything she can to reach out to a bunch of people, her sales process, everything. She's very consistent. For some reason, she was not getting any results. And she was getting very frustrated. I got on a call with her and we went through everything. Everything looked good. I even looked at her conversations she was saying. I'm like, then finally it just hit me. I'm like, tell me a little bit about your relationships. Well, how do you think of other human beings? And then how do you think about your family members? And this is where the dark pit opened up. She's like, she doesn't trust people. She wants to help people, but she doesn't trust people. She's had very negative experiences, so she's carrying that with her in her business. So
Yeah, there's a
we
lot
carry with
there.
us lots of things with us.
It is, yeah, it's a lot there, and it's because it's not something that you're going to learn in the school. You can't depend on the school system to teach you this stuff. You really have to live it and go through some things. So, when you're like I was asking, when you were able to transition and read these books, what were the books or what were the things that were sticking out as you were coming into this new wealth of knowledge now that you're sober, you're not doing any drugs, and now you're spending your Friday nights probably reading books of all things,
Out of all things, right? I think, well, I started with not personal development stuff. I started with trying to understand history, philosophy, and I wanted to understand where I came from. I tried to understand religion because one of my biggest confusions were like I came from a good family. We were a religious family. We had really good values. So why is it that when we came here, all of a sudden all those values disappeared for me? Even though I didn't want to, I felt guilty every
Mhm.
time I did something. A lot of people go through that. They could be religious, they come from a good family, and they will do certain things.
But
Why is it that that changed? And I wanted to understand that. So I studied different religions. I studied history. I studied philosophy. And then later on, that slowly took me towards understanding that, you know what, I'm not the only one. There are other human beings who have dealt with it. And in fact, we've been thinking about these challenges for thousands of years as human beings. Just that I was never exposed to it because none of the stuff was ever taught in school in the way that I was learning, exactly like you mentioned it.
exactly right.
So from there, and then I was exposed to personal development much later on in the normal sense that people understand it. But before that, I actually met my mentor, who actually all he did was ask me questions. All he
Hmm.
did was get me to think deeper about the things that I'm doing. He would just ask me, he's like, why are you, when I studied engineering, he's like, why are you doing engineering? And he never told me not to do it or to not go towards it. He just asked me, he's like, and then he would ask me questions like, well, why do you act this way versus your siblings act the other way? Like what happens? I didn't know the answer, but I would just try to answer. And then later on I would think about it. I was like, why? I don't know, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
And that started to open up some things inside of me. And it was not easy, by the way. So I remember I was going through such a turmoil in that process. I didn't know what the hell I was going through because I didn't know what was going on. I would I would lock myself in the washroom and I would just cry. I was just like, what's going on with me? I would
Yeah.
send messages to people. I'm sorry. I would feel my guilt. I would feel lots of things. And then as this kind of built up, like I couldn't get away. It's as if something got activated internally. You call it your soul
Mhm.
or your conscience. And I remember the last time I had a job and I got laid off. I still remember I went to my wife. I was all excited. I was like, I got laid off because she
Yeah,
knew
you
I was
tell her,
trying.
oh man, that must have been crazy.
She already knew because I had been talking about it. Just like they're considering laying off a bunch of people, and like I'd rather volunteer because knew I was sick and tired of that. I wanted to
Wow.
start my own path, and that gave me about 3 months of employment insurance. That gave me the
Hmm.
space. So I remember my wife used to go to work, and she would come back, and she'd be like, "What did you do?" I pretty much cried all day.
Yeah.
But she knew
Yeah.
what I meant. But I actually had
Okay.
to delve in and deal with the things that were there. I had to
Hmm.
study. I had to like, why do I think the way I do? Why do I feel like a victim at times? Why do I feel like I can't move forward?
Mhm.
And what are the things that I need to build to move forward? And so I was building. It took me about 2 3 months to figure out which direction I wanted to go towards. But as I went towards it, I realized I had to deal with a lot of internal conflict to be even open to go towards it. And part of it was support from others, from my wife, from my mentors, some friends. And part of it was I had to make a decision to move in a completely different direction than most people wouldn't. And that, I mean, this is a long journey. We're talking a span of like 10, 15 plus years. It wasn't a 1 day thing where I had a realization.
Mhm.
And even you talked about books. It wasn't like one book I read gave me all the realizations. So I remember one of the first books I got into was Psychology and Religion by Carl Jung,
Mhm.
and it really opened up and was like, huh, it opened me up to people's and I've read that book 3 times. Every time I've had a completely different understanding
Hmm.
of the whole book, which is
Right.
such a small book too. And then I read another book on history around how people, it was called Saracens. It was the Christian world's perception of the Islamic world at the time when the Islamic world was a
Wow.
superpower, how they thought of him, how they would look at him.
Right.
And then I started studying world history. Then I started looking into other religions, and it started like, holy shit, human beings have been dealing with these problems for thousands of years, and religion is one of the systems that had been doing that, and different philosophies has helped us make sense of it. And then I started thinking about it. I started having conversations. There was a point where I remember I used to go to coffee shops just to have for hours, have debates with my
Talk to
friends around these
strangers.
things.
Or the oh, with friends. Yeah. There's sometimes
Yeah,
strangers you can talk to.
and that went from partying to just sit down in a coffee shop talking about these things, and it helped me make sense of some of these things. And finally, when I remember the last jump that we made. I remember I told my wife, "Is like, I think this might be the last vacation we go to for a while." We
Wow.
went out for 3 weeks. We went towards California, Mexico. We did a cruise. We went to a couple of conferences. Like,
Mhm.
I think this is gonna give us the solution. I had a hunch. I showed up to this conference with 700 plus business owners or potential business owners from around the world, 47 different countries. And I
Right.
remember being in a circle, and they did a group exercise. It was a mix of personal and professional development. They were teaching a lot about how you can put your message out there. It was created by Brendan Burchard. You might know him, fairly famous guy. Um,
Name
so
sounds familiar.
so I was in a group with like 6 or 7 people, and it was a group exercise where people were talking about why they're there, what their mission is, what they want to learn. And as I'm listening to all these people at the time, I didn't know how to express myself or anything. I didn't have like I was just an internal thinker for the most part, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was learning. And every person that I listened to, and that was one of the first things that I shared. I'm like, where have all you people been all my life? It's like I found my world. I'm like, like
Yeah.
these are the people that actually care about things to
Right.
make a difference, to change, to create a different kind of life that they wanna. They're open to their own authenticity, and I needed a community like that or a group like that. So that started my path.
Yeah, so like, well, firstly, on the mentorship side, there's a guy named Rob Sperry who has famously says questions are the answers. And
Yeah.
if you guys really, peel back everything that he expressed, it started with asking questions. It started with someone being inquisitive. It started with simply, again, not asking it in a judgmental way, but simply asking why. And I remember I had a similar journey when I started reading books regularly, and I would go to my mom and ask certain questions, and she noticed the change in me. She said, "Whoa, that book's got you asking questions now. That book has you asking this and asking that." So on that front, it's incredibly, incredibly important that you don't just let things be what they are. You really have to ask to figure out what your purpose is, because if you don't do it, like you just mentioned, the religion, the politics, the things that you're kind of pointed in the direction of without even knowing why you're moving in a direction, it's so easy to go down that road and not know exactly what it is you're doing before you know it. So, when you come back from that business conference, walk us through how you were able to go from there to get your first client, because that, as I was looking through and I was listening to a lot of the people speak so highly of you, I'm like, how was he able to get someone to be that open? Because it's not easy to find people that are just going to be willing to tell you a lot of their personal things that are hurting them.
Yeah, that was another big struggle I went through. I knew, so when we jumped into entrepreneurship, I mean, imagine I had just finished, jumped into my career as a mechanical engineer, and
Hmm.
I got my first two jobs. After the second job, I knew I wasn't gonna do work for anybody. It's just that,
Right.
like, it wasn't even them. It's like I saw that I was looking for something else.
Hmm.
And so the decision was that I'm gonna find my path forward, but it wasn't necessarily business. I didn't have any ideas about business per se. I was looking to work with people. I wanted to grow myself, to be honest.
Yeah.
If I go to the foundations of it, I wanted to be on a growth journey. I wanted to learn more because I felt like I had just begun, and I didn't want to have to go day in day out, go to a job and do something meaningless and come back home and be miserable. I
Mhm.
wanted to study the things that mattered to me, no matter what it was. I wanted to grow in the way that I wanted to grow as a leader. I wanted to make a difference in somebody's life, which specifically meant that I wanted to help people become more conscious of themselves because that I struggled a lot in that process.
Mhm.
Um, and so at that conference, Brendan Bashar also offered, and I didn't know that it was such a thing as coaching at the time. And it connected me. This is what my mentor did to me, and he didn't even call it that. He's like,
Hmm.
"Oh, there's certification for high performance coaching,"
Ah.
and it was like $10,000 investment, and I did not have that. We were already in debt, and my wife was sitting beside me. I was like, I had a big ego at the time, and I was like, "I'll figure this out. I don't need it." And my wife
Right.
talked to me that I was like, "You need this. I know you can do it eventually, but this is what you're looking for."
Well,
And I'm
first
like,
of all,
"What
we
the
got to
hell?"
shout out to the wife on that one, because you
I
just said
know,
you're
right?
in debt and she's still pushing for you to actually get the $10,000 package. You got to shout out wifey on that one. Shout out to wifey if you're listening.
Without her, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be here because it was. I mean, we were in debt. Like when I say in debt, like we didn't like she
And
didn't
that's
care.
what's crazy, because I know women that would have said the opposite. I personally know women that would said the opposite. We're in debt. You can't afford it, honey, and just move on. But the fact that she's able to say, "Hey, look, I know how much you want it, I know how much you need it. We'll figure this thing out." You gotta give kudos to her, because not everyone's like that. So
Yeah, no, definitely not. Well, she won up that too. So I was like, you know what? She's like, I'm getting it if you're not getting it because this is gonna help
there you
us.
go.
I was like,
There
okay,
you
fine. You do that. I'll work on the marketing side. She
go.
goes
Right.
and I'm like, where are we gonna get the money? She's like, call your mom. I don't care if it goes on her credit card. We'll pay her off in like 3, 4 months.
Yes.
Uh, I was
1000%
like,
for
I
sure.
hated that. I called my mom like, don't ask questions. She's like, I just need to put this on your card. This is important.
I
She
could only
actually
imagine what
surprisingly
that
didn't
phone
ask
call was
me any
like.
questions. So I put her on her card on multiple payments. She got the certification, and I still remember it was. And we were talking about authenticity. One of the reasons I was attracted to Brendan Burchard's work because there was so much authenticity, and I
Right.
wanted to like, share my gratitude. And so part of that program was that whoever signed up, they could go take a picture with Brendan, and
Mhm.
I had been the one following him, not my wife. And,
Right.
but and we asked the staff, they're like, no, you can't. It's just one person.
Mhm.
So I told my wife, and like, just when you see Brendan, tell him that I just wanted to thank him. And she goes in
There
the
you
long
go.
lineup, and she was just standing outside me. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, I just wanted to personally thank him.
Yes.
Um, About 20 minutes later, she comes running out. I was like, come on in. So I go in. I couldn't, I was so emotional. I couldn't even thank him. And I
Mhm.
did. He
Yeah.
recognized my wife. Like, he just wants to say he's very thankful. We
And
took
this
a
was
picture.
years, at this point, this was years of you keeping up with his work, right? So it's like this is a
This was about a year.
yeah, this is
No,
a
6 months.
major
I'd say 6 months of like following his YouTube channel and looking
Mhm.
into some of this stuff. And then I finally pulled the trigger to go there.
Right.
Uh,
This is
but,
major,
but
guys. And not only that, for you creators out there, this is the importance of consistently putting out your product and putting out your material. You don't know who you're going to help. You
yeah.
know who you're touching. You don't know how much you're going to actually help people change their lives, couples, families, so many things that you can be doing, but you got to be consistent with it. You have to put it out every
Yeah.
single day, regardless of the shares, the likes, the negative comments. They're going to come. I have my share of them. You got to keep rolling regardless. That's how much you got to believe in what it is you're doing.
Yeah, it has to be. I'd say it's not even like oh, I have to do this or it's gonna be important, but there's like an obsession I've noticed
Mhm.
with people who do this that they're obsessed with the work that they're doing, and that was
Absolutely.
the same thing I noticed with Brendan. That's the same thing I have. But the thing, so after that, when we came back, now we're still in debt. Nothing has changed. We've created, we've jumped into something new thing, which puts us more in debt. But like, what do we do?
Right.
So I was like, if I go back to my career path as an engineer, I'll get paid more, but my mental bandwidth will be taken by that. So I made a big decision. I was like, I'm not going back there. At the time, Uber was picking up. I started driving Uber,
I've been Uber.
and I was
Absolutely.
running
Yes,
the
sir.
thing on the side. So all I had was a couple hours a day to do this. It was difficult. And about a couple of years after that, a year and a half after that, my daughter was born too. Now I'm the sole provider because we both decided that she'd be my daughter. And by the way, when we came back, she handed the certification back to me. She's like, "I got this for for you,
Now,
not for
this
me."
is back when you're in Canada, right? Or did
Yeah,
you?
we're back in Canada, and we have our first daughter. I've run the business for 1 year, but I was struggling to even understand how what the hell business
How
was
to do
because I
that.
didn't
Right,
know what
right,
the hell
right,
it
right.
was. And I finally realized I needed a community to work with, so I started to get together with other coaches and business owners, and I had to put consistent time in it. And for the next 2 years, 2.5 years, I put a lot of time, effort, energy to understand sales, understand coaching, get feedback on my skill sets, and
Mhm,
understand how other coaches are doing. And pretty soon that started, and I was putting out content at that time too.
mhm.
And I wasn't. You're not getting any likes. You're not getting any feedback. You're just putting it out day in day out because you believe in the thing that you're doing. And then finally, I started getting clients, and then there's a lot of practice that needed to go into it. It didn't make sense because I got trained for 1 week. They're like, "Oh, you're ready to offer a high ticket program." I'm like,
Yeah,
"That's not how a skill set works. Knowledge. I knew enough of that." I'm like, and then Brendan said, "Well, this is one of those things you learn on the job." So
exactly.
I knew
But
that I
what I
had to do
love
both.
about that, and to not to cut you off, but to make sure we make sure this point is clear, he focused on high ticket. Right? He
Yeah.
focused on making sure you're not wasting your time with low ticket stuff, but high ticket stuff, and that tests your belief as the actual person that's providing it and putting it out there. So I'm loving the fact that he, made sure high ticket was the priority.
Yeah, and part of it was I had very few skill sets at the time. I wasn't a speaker. To be honest, I would hyperventilate if I spoke in front of a room at that time. Now I speak in public, I run events,
Mhm.
but I didn't have that ability. I didn't have facilitation ability. The only ability I had was I had a really good mind. I knew how to ask questions, and I loved talking to people. Like, okay, I can do one-on-one. As scary as it is, I can do that. And then I was like, and then I read another coach's book, The Prosperous Coach by Rich Litvin. It was like, if you really want to do this, you're gonna be successful in this. You got to coach, coach, and coach. Forget about the business stuff. Learn it in the background, but you got to get enough reps. If you don't have that, your thing that you think is of value in the marketplace, it might not be. And it wasn't. I wasn't the best coach, even though I had a lot of experience behind me in terms of my own growth. But delivering that value to somebody else who's willing to pay thousands of dollars for you to, and as a coach, I get paid to give people results, not get paid to just talk to people like a therapist would.
1,000%. Yeah, you got to get them results because you don't get the results, that stuff travels around, and then you got a massive, massive problem on your hands. So the
Yeah.
results are huge.
So the first 5, 6 clients, to be honest, when I look back there, I cringe at times. That's what I knew at the time. I helped them. I didn't charge that much, but I didn't know enough. I just didn't have enough skill sets, and they could afford what they could afford at the time. But I
Mhm.
learned from that process, and I also got a lot of support at the time to feedback, and I got other mentors and coaches that helped me. And then fast forward about, I'd say, 100 plus sessions done, then I started to understand, oh, okay, this is how you help people. This is how you refine your skills. This is how sales works. This is
Mhm.
how you make offers. This is how you put yourself out there. This is how you build contracts and agreements and joint ventures and collaborations. And just 2.5 years later, that world opened up, and I all of a sudden I went to six figures overnight. No, this took
Right.
years to get.
Exactly. It was years of you going through that. So just for anyone that's listening now, is there a particular ideal client that you have in mind, just to make sure that if there's anyone listening that wants to work with you, that they kind of have a framework a little bit about who you look to work with and how you help them?
So the majority of my clients are either real estate investors at this point, specifically multifamily real estate investors in US,
Hmm.
and entrepreneurs. I work with a huge range of people, from stay-at-home moms to students to executives, entrepreneurs of different kinds to investors, and I've worked with teams as well. Actually, I've worked with the whole community with
Hmm.
my team. So I have a wide range of experience, and I have a team of coaches with me too. So it's not
Sure.
just me. Part of my program is me, but I've also connected. If I go through a process with a client, I see they need a different kind of support, because I have a whole community for coaches, and I have a lot of connections in that space. I can connect them with the right coach. It doesn't have to be with me. My
Right.
role is to connect you with the support that you need, whatever that looks like. But it doesn't matter where you are. Depending on what kind of support you need, it will vary. The prices are going to vary. Investment is going to vary at huge range. But before I even onboard you into any of the program, you will go through a lot of stuff, like a whole journey that will help you already. You don't even need to sign up to any of my programs, whether it's through my podcast or through the resources I have on my website, or if you come to, I do these workshops every 6 weeks completely for free for public facing. Anybody can show up to them. And I'll give a gift at the end of this too. If you just go on the journey with me, you will gain a lot. And most people, they won't even sign up for my program, but they gain a lot of value in the process. Because ultimately, I want the message to go out. I want you to grow. And if at some point we're aligned, great, we work together. That doesn't affect me right now. I've worked on this for a long time. I see this as a long-term journey. But no matter where you are on your journey, if you're ready to grow, if you're ready to go to the next level, if you're going through a transition, if you're especially ready to go towards entrepreneurship, I've been able to help a lot of people in that process. If you're ready to jump ship in that journey, but if you're struggling with your relationships, if you're struggling with your own thoughts, emotions with yourself, I can support in that area as well.
Well, there you go, listeners. We have another gift. I hope you guys are taking advantage of this. There's been several folks that have come on the show and provided a gift at the end. So, all that being said, can you just tell people a little bit about what's coming down the pipeline? You've already mentioned that you have other coaches. What's the next step? What are your plans to go with the business?
So I look at them as one, even though they're two separate businesses. It's the same umbrella. I believe in focusing on one path, even though I could go into different opportunities. But this is the coaching world gave me my life, literally my purpose, the thing that I do that I love every day. This does not work for me. This is play and fun. I literally tell my kids, like, you know how you play there, and this is the same thing for me. There's no difference between the two.
That's
So it's like,
that's a
oh,
great
okay.
feeling too, guys. It is. It's an unbelievable feeling when
It's a completely different world, right? I don't look at work as work. This is my
yes.
playground. But it also gives me a huge amount of fulfillment, a sense of purpose. I get to help a lot of people in the process.
Right.
So Sorry, take me back to your question. What was the
I'm just,
question?
yeah, what's next? What do you see coming
What's
up?
next? So under that umbrella, so it's all coaches. On one side, I support entrepreneurs on the performance mindset, those kind of things. On the other side, I'm helping coaches develop their business. I have a community and their skill sets as a coach. And that business I have with a couple of partners in there. But the future looks like this. We actually made a major decision this past month. We're actually going on the road. We're going to be mobile. We moved into our motorhome, and we're going to be traveling between U.S. and Canada.
Well, there
Uh,
you go,
so half
man.
the time. In winter, we're going to be in the warm region. In summer, we're back because we have lots of family and friends on this
Hey,
side of the
man,
world.
if you're in West Palm Beach, Florida, you hit me up. We gonna connect on something for sure.
I'll call you. I'll be in generally I'm in the Orlando region, but we can connect there
I
as
can make
well.
it there, man. I can make it there. Don't worry about that. I'll get wherever I got to get to.
On the business side, my goal is to serve more people in a quality setting. I usually don't run in-person events for entrepreneurs at least once a year. I do multiple online workshops for them. I have a community for entrepreneurs to go to the next level online community as well, because those are things that help me a lot. And where am I heading in business? I don't have this goal of, oh, I need to do 100 million or 10 million or anything like that. I have the life that I want. We're getting to live what we want to live. I'll serve people whoever I can. If we get to the next level, great. If we don't get, we have what we have right now, and I'm happy and at peace with it.
And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
The best way is my website. You'll see my name there, FAISALENSAUN.com. In fact, as soon as you get there, you'll see a PDF there that you can download as a gift. And you also see the current workshop that I'm doing. So you can sign up for that. You actually get my course for free if you sign up for my workshop. It's a whole course that I charge on my website. But if you sign up for the workshop for free, you get that for free. So you can actually work on your vision, strategy, planning for the next 5 to 10 years.
Mhm.
I take my clients through there twice a year, and we usually finish all our planning for the next year end of November, not when January starts. You're too late when you start in January. So
Awesome.
go
Awesome.
sign up and do your planning. It will help you become much more strategic. It will help you come up with a vision for the next 5 to 10 years. Most people don't even know what's going to happen next week, but this will give you a process that's been tested to work with a lot of people, and it'll give you a path forward. And then you can join me on the free workshop shop, and it's going to help you a lot with your relationship, whether that's in business, partnerships, your relationship with your spouse, wherever. It'll help you become aware of some key things that you might not be.
Mhm. All right. And all of that will be included in the show notes as well, guys. So make sure you tap in there. So if I sell the final thing I do to close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are back in that train station in Canada. You're puking your brains out. You're trying to get coherent. You're all over the place. I want you to pretend that that version of you has come into the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement, and we will officially close.
No, I love that question. I would say have don't be, if you are there, somebody who's listening to this, don't be too judgmental towards yourself, because there are reasons why that's happening. But just also know that there's a way out, even though you might feel like a victim in the moment. You might feel like you can't break through, or you might feel like you are stuck in that moment. There's always a way through. Find support, find help, whether that comes in the form of a book, podcast, or a coach or a mentor. You might have to get out of your own circle to find that, but go out there. There's so much help. There are so many incredible people around the world. I never believed that until I put myself out there. But there's a lot of help out there, especially in the world we live in. You have access to every information. Step back, give yourself space, and start learning, because as you become learning and curious, you will learn to grow, and give yourself some grace, because this stuff is tough, and you're not the only one dealing with this. Everybody is to some degree.
1,000. I'm glad you brought that up because the reason I close out with that question, if you're new around here, is because if you are that person, like you said, if you are personally going through that now, the promise of this show is to help you get through whatever the challenge or the obstacle may be happening in your life right now. So appreciate you, Faisal, man. Listen, when you got to hit me up. I can't wait to stay in
Oh,
touch.
for sure.
Stay plugged into your journey and all that good stuff. Everyone out there, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.
Take care.